Welcome back to the OIS podcast. Today's guest, Jeffrey Nau, shares how an early career in ophthalmology eventually led to becoming the CEO of a publicly traded company. Jeff addresses some of their recent setbacks from COVID and opportunities that lie ahead. Let's listen in.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dr. Ehsan Sadri. I'm a board-certified ophthalmologist here in Newport Beach, California. I'm also the co-founder and GP of Visionary Ventures, also located here in Southern Cal in Aliso Viejo. I work along with my really good friend, Jeff Nau, who's our managing partner, and Dr. Toby Tyson, one of the other GPs. I'm really delighted to have our next guest here. He is coming in and discussing his new venture, and we'll talk about his background a little bit. Jeffrey Nau, how you doing?
Very good. How are you?
Good. It's good to have you on our podcast. We're excited to have you. And for those of you who don't know Jeff has really, had an illustrious career in developing sort of different therapies for about 15 years experience in biotechnologies, medical device. And, he was recently VP of Clinical Medical Affairs at Ophtotech. And prior to that, he was the Medical Science Director of Genentech, working on things on lucentis, like the back of the eye. So now he's in the front of the eye, actually now in the nasal region, eye region, if you will. Huge unmet need, dry eye. How you doing today? Tell us a little about yourself and what made you sort of fall in love with Oyster Point and kind of lead the team.
Yeah, well, that's great. So I would say I really started out in ophthalmology in the front of the eye. So although I've spent the vast majority of my career in the back of the eye, my actual first foray into ophthalmology was when I was in high school. I actually worked as a technician in a multi-specialty practice. So primarily cataracts, although I was there for the first Visidyne laser to roll through the door on the retina side, and really was there when we started doing evening symposia for patients in the very outset of LASIK. And so was an interesting time, and that sort of caught my eye. I loved being a tech while I was, really getting ready and sort of in that stage where you're trying to get some clinical experience before you go off to college and go to medical school. And eventually worked my way over onto the retina side and became the lead photographer for the practice at the time. And back then we injected our own dyes and had a lot more autonomy than people do now, I think. So that was exciting for me. And I'll date myself, but that was back when we had to actually take the photos into the dark room and no digital at the time. Went from there and started working in actual eye banking with corneal transplants. And so all through my undergrad career, worked in eye bank, collecting corneas and tissues, taking a look at endothelial cell counts and grading tissue for transplant. And so always, sort of interested in ophthalmology and was very focused on the front of the eye. And then when I went off to medical school, I decided to actually take a research year, and I spent a year at Wills Eye Hospital on the oncology service. And so had a great year there with the Shields, was in the operating room, was in the clinic, and spent some good time in seeing things that, I would say an everyday ophthalmologist or even retina specialist, it would take them a whole career to see some of the things I saw in that year. So it was really great for me to have that opportunity. And then after that, transitioned over to industry and started out with a company, very early called Generic Corporation, which most people may or may not recognize, but it was a drug called squalene lactate, which kind of came back around. And at the time, this was in the day before we had anti-VEGF therapy, and we were treating patients with things that were really chemotherapeutic agents. So learned how to deliver IV therapy at the time, and we were doing masked IV studies. So that was pretty exciting. And then, had the opportunity to work at a number of other great companies. So was with Acuity Pharmaceuticals when we injected the first RNA interference drug into the eye. Back then, intravitreal injections were a big deal. People were cautious about them, I would say, and a little bit scared, and usually reserved for infections of the posterior chamber. And then, had a great experience working on the Lucentis. I mean, it's just an amazing drug, and a great team of people that were there. Was able to be there for the launch of the diabetic macular edema indication, and really enjoyed. That was my first time in a big corporation. So learned a lot of exciting things there. Learned good and bad about working in a large company, and then really came back to Ophtotech because I think I'm much more of a smaller company startup entrepreneurial person at heart, and then had the opportunity through my relationships that I'd built over time to come to Oyster Point. And so we started up Oyster Point really in earnest in 2017, and filed the IND for the product that we're currently working on in 2018. And here we are today on the verge of filing an NDA. So it's been a bit of a whirlwind development program here, but it's been really exciting.
I mean, that's a really good overview of your past, and it's interesting that there's so many different paths to success. And I think one of the things that you mentioned is networking. I think one of the things that I think we were not taught in medical school, physicians, people in allied health, people in laboratory, people in clinical trials, you're not taught that. Whereas in business school and law school, I think there's a huge emphasis on networking. And I think that's really, for our listeners, is really important for them to really hone in on. There's different ways. You don't have to have the best pedigree, but you have to create your pedigree. You have to create your network, and that just takes a lot of effort, as much as what you've done in the laboratory, and also putting companies together. So that's great. And the other thing is, I think I really liked about your background is your ability to really listen to your heart, because we have to be happy with what we do every day. And from what I'm hearing, that is, you like the smaller startup, and so do I. And so, because there's a lot more challenges, but at the same time, a lot more opportunities. So that's great to hear. And, you mentioned the challenges. What about this COVID? How are you guys doing? Obviously, you've missed sort of a lot of the, I would say, probably the bulk of this you were already done, and you're now submitting to the NDA, which is great. That's for your dry eye disease, which is, for those of you who don't know in the audience, is, something in the order of 30 to 50 million, depending on the studies. Huge opportunity, huge unmet need. And how is that now affecting your strategy for the OC-01 for what we call neurotrophic keratitis, which is now you're in an earlier phase? How are you guys strategizing?
Yeah. Well, so as the pandemic unfolded, I think we were lucky in the sense that we really missed the height of the pandemic while our enrollment was going on, although it did curtail the last few sites enrolling patients. So, if you were to look at the data from our trial, you'll see there's some missing assessments on that last visit, which is the most important visit, where we're collecting a lot of the primary endpoint data. And then, we had one site that decided not to participate because of, the pandemic beginning. And so, I would say from that front, it was a little bit of unlucky in that the end of the study had to curtail, but we consider ourselves incredibly lucky that we were as far along as we were, because if we were in the middle, we'd probably still be sitting here today trying to finish up that trial. And, it's really put us into a unique position in the sense that we're locked down as a company. So at the moment, everybody's working remotely, which, wouldn't be conducive to being in the clinic, but it has really put us into a unique position for getting this NDA filed. And so people have been able to put their head down. We're not traveling all over the country. We don't have as much clinical development going on. So really the areas we've focused are, let's get the NDA filed. Let's put together the best submission. And then we've really shifted more towards the pipeline and the preclinical work that we've been doing. And so, unfortunately, we won't be able to talk too much publicly about the preclinical work, but we will at some point in time. And we do have a a number of projects that we continue to work on in the lab, which has been less impacted by the clinic. As we move into the fall time, we're obviously keeping an eye on how the clinics are working. I would say one of the fortunate things we hear is that there's still clinical development happening, still patients coming in, albeit at a slower pace. And ophthalmology, I think, is hurt a little bit more than other areas in the sense that we don't have as many sort of necessary therapies, right. Unlike oncology or cardiology, where patients need to get back to the clinic and need to get their therapy. I think it allows the patient to decide, what's the risk benefit of me going in for a dry eye trial, for example. So I'm real excited that we were able to finish, because I certainly wouldn't want to be beginning our enrollment this fall not knowing what's happening. So we're still on track with the neurotrophic keratitis development. I think our plan is to continue to watch and be mindful of the clinic, but we're poised to execute, and we'll sort of see how the fall goes. I think based on what we see going on in the country today, it's certainly not where we hoped to be. And I think, we'll continue to watch how things progress over the fall.
Yeah, it's certainly challenging even for our clinics. We run a lot of clinical trials in my practice, and it's all how you position. I was on a phone with a large glaucoma company, earlier, and we're just trying to talk about enrollments, and we've, knock on wood, be able to enroll a lot of the patients, because I think part of it is because I think, really focus on clinical trials. I think that's the hallmark. I think you would agree with that.
Yeah.
We work with Aura. They're phenomenal at doing what they do best, and I've recently got to know them a little bit. But I think regardless, I think these patients that come in are pretty motivated, and they're really wanting to get the care, and are the people who, what we found in our clinical trials is, they're motivated, and the doctor has a good relationship with them, there's trust, they'll come in as long as you have obvious safety measures in place, which most people do. So it's interesting to see how like you said, some of the sites were curtailed. I think the majority of them are pretty open. I've talked to, and they're busy. Depending obviously where they're at in the country too, because there is a little bit of a fear factor of people coming in, older patients. So I like what you've done. I like the fact also that you've taken this selective molecule and you're now targeting different disease states, which really candidly are both unmet needs, are novel, and you guys are applying for a public offering. Did that go through in May? Is that still going through, or how's that working?
No, so we actually went public in October of last year, and we actually did a follow-on offering in May. So
right.
We were able to raise some additional capital on the back end of our phase 3 data. But I think going back to your comment, one of the things that we see as a opportunity in this marketplace, and I think is also an opportunity with our molecule, is if you look across the landscape at many of the front of the eye therapies, they're very targeted for a single disease or a single state. And so, this product and the way that it works, we think has applicability across a number of different disease areas. And so to be able to have multiple indications within your label is pretty unique. It's something that we worked on and prided ourselves on with Lucentis, where we were able to have the AMD label, the RVO, then the DME, and you sort of build those clinical data sets and just the totality of the data behind the molecule. And we think that could be also something here. So, we're very interested in other disease states. Neurotrophic keratitis is one of them. I think corneal neuropathic pain patients is another area that we might be interested in. This is also a product that can be delivered for, patients where we're looking at potentially having treatment for these higher order aberrations, as patients are going to have, surgeries, whether it be LASIK, whether it be cataract surgery, sort of pre-treatment before they go in to make sure that ocular surface is healthy. And then maybe some treatment on the back end where we're keeping the eye lubricated with the patient's own natural tear film and keeping it healthy. Looking at things like, contact lens intolerance. many of the products that are out there, you have to remove your contact lenses. We look at this product as something that could be delivered while the lenses are in place, and you're using really your own natural tear film and all of the components that are a part of that to hydrate and lubricate the ocular surface. So we really want to look at this product as, what other areas can we sort of build upon from the evidence-based side, and look at the indications that are applicable. And it's really just a unique way of delivering therapy.
Yeah, I think, and I think the wonderful thing about dry eyes, like you said, clinically, is it sort of is a large net. So post cataract, pre cataract outcomes, so much of the outcomes is based on the corneal or ocular surface issues. And patients swear by, they take their drops, and at the end of the day, they're preserved, and I think that's a big unmet need right there.
Yeah.
For me as a clinician, it's exciting because you're not now worried about BAK hitting the eye, right? You're using your own natural system. And I think pharmaceutically is probably a little more appealing than device side. I think that was part of I was involved in the intranasal medical device. I think it's a little bit of a different conversation for the patient, and comfort wise as well.
Yeah. And you agree with that? To your point with the preservative, one of the things that we've done when you look at the nasal spray landscape, I think it's important to understand, much like on the eye drop landscape, they're mostly preserved. So almost every product out there contains some sort of a preservative. And just like on the ocular surface where those preservatives can have an effect, in the intranasal space, we see actually toxicity to the nasal mucosa, where we have lower beat frequency of the cilia, and there's actually some negative impacts. And so when we've developed this product, we developed it as a preservative-free product right from the beginning. As you think about, how do Americans use their intranasal products, they're really for things that are like allergies, sinusitis. And so
short amount clinically.
Oftentimes, they're delivered over a short period of time. But when you're delivering a product which you want the patient to take chronically, we took a lot of pain to develop this as a preservative-free product. We could have easily gone an easy route with it and put a preservative in there. Mm-hmm. And so we have a very special device that delivers the product and doesn't allow bacterial ingress into the solution. We think that's important for the safety of the patient. And like you said, you're sparing the ocular surface and not putting anything on the ocular surface. And so this is a great way to hydrate the ocular surface and reestablish that tear film homeostasis without having any preservatives on there. And then outside of the US, interestingly, most nasal products outside the US are preservative free. So here in the US, we use a lot of preservatives in our products. So that also allows us, from a business perspective, to step outside of the US, go into the other marketplaces, and not have to reformulate the drug and worry about those preservatives.
That's fascinating. So you're looking at a more global sort of reach. Tell us, going IPO, obviously before COVID was probably a good time, right?
Yeah.
Timing. Do you feel that that's something that's difficult to do as opposed to getting acquired from your position standpoint? If you're talking to other sort of entrepreneurs that are kind of in this process, what percentage of the companies go IPO versus getting acquired, and what are the challenges of going to IPO?
Yeah, well, and I think that the market dynamics sort of change how lucrative it is to go public. And so at the time when we were thinking about going public, last year was a banner year for companies going public. And we've had great years and we've had bust years. And last year had its ups and downs. But what we've tried to do with Oyster Point is really build a standalone, medium-sized pharma company with aspirations to grow that business. And so we look at this product, the OCO1 nasal spray product for dry eye disease, as a great foundational product to build upon. And if you really look at our space, it's changed since I began in ophthalmology, in that we have a lot of consolidation at the top. Even the traditional companies that were the big companies have consolidated themselves now. We've got a lot of entrepreneurial companies, but that middle space is a little bit of a white space. And so, there's very few folks that are at the top to be the acquirers anymore. And so to build your company, I think what we said was, we're going to really take a standalone approach. We're going to build value in the company. We're going to continue to create the pipeline, continue to develop our lead asset moving forward. We're poised and in a position to start to look at other molecules outside the company and bring it in. My management team right now, although we're very busy on a number of things, including this NDA, one of the things we're focused in on is, let's look at our pipeline and let's start to plug new molecules in at various stages of that pipeline, so that we've got a good life cycle management for the company. And so, I think the public piece is a good way to finance the company. And you're also, obviously there's a lot of complexity to it as well. So I wouldn't say that, I think there are a lot of CEOs that go through it and say, I'm never going back that way again. It was one time and done. I think also, you hear from a lot of people that it's a sort of a younger CEO's job, because in the old way of doing things, and I think that's changing now, you're on the road a lot, right? So you're out talking to investors, you are away from home, you're really pounding the pavement, getting ready for the IPO. Then the IPO happens. It's like going through a marathon for a week, and it's just crazy.
Yeah.
And then at the end, you're hoping that everything works out, but there's no guarantees usually right up until the last minute, right? And so it's a great process to go through. It's stressful, but I think the interesting thing that's going to probably happen through this year, and we'll see how it changes that landscape, is the travel and the going face to face is really going to be different. So anybody who's I see people going public now, and I envy them, because they can do a Zoom call from home, and they're not roaming around the city getting picked up by a car every 5 minutes to go to investor meetings. And so, you just wonder how much of this will sort of stick as we get out of the pandemic and move forward, because obviously it's a lot more efficient the way that we're doing things now, right? I'm not hopping on a plane between San Francisco and Denver and New York, and going to various meetings and setting up schedules, and the capital that you invest in it as well is completely changed. Zoom's pretty cheap compared to plane tickets. So
yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if you saw, I think it was Goldman, they raised $2 billion in 2 hours using Zoom for a fund they just launched. And it was all before, like you said, it was before it would have been a roadshow, dinners, and just Uber driver picks you up, go to another dinner.
Yeah.
And now that's been changed. And like telemedicine, it'll be interesting to see how much of that sticks, post COVID.
Yeah.
Right. So like, we're seeing patients in the clinic, and I love telemedicine, because patients, like half of the patients that don't even need to come in, they don't need to come in, for them and for me. It's easier. Part of you, it's like you said, it's like, I wanted to stick, and I wanted to, there's a blend, there's a balance there, but I think ultimately I have a feeling that it's going to stick. I have a feeling that this has gone far enough that people are going to probably have they're going to say, well, if it's an easier, more cost-effective way of doing it, why wouldn't you do it? And I think at the end of the day, that wins, whether we like it or not. And I think telemedicine, for instance, is not going to go away. There's no way. I think it's just going to explode. I think patients love it. I think the roadshow will be another one to see what happens.
I'm interested. We've before the pandemic started, we invested in Zoom's room technology in our office. So we have all the offices wired up with speakers and cameras and things. And, I think this has also made us think about, what does home look like? What does the home office look like? But I do think that the technology is there for this to be something that sticks. And, we think about how much you get done when you have a half hour of time and you're not, having to traverse to another meeting or get on a plane, or, you can get a lot of things done in a very short period of time between Zoom meetings. What I worry is, to your point that you made at the outset of the call, though, we do have to think about how to keep that sort of personal piece there. And it's something we pay very much attention to with our employees. But I think, the old adage of lots of business deals get done on the golf course sticks as well. So, what I do worry about, and we'll all have to work through this, is that personal feeling that you lose when you're not in the room with someone, shaking their hand, going out to dinner, having that social interface. It's going to trickle over to business in ways that we probably don't totally understand today as well. So, for you as well, I mean, I'm sure you have patients that half the reason they come in is because of a medical reason, and the other half is because they want to have that interaction with you, right?
Yeah.
And so for those patients that lose that, the other piece that I also think about with my employees is, there's the mental health aspect of the whole thing.
For sure. Yeah, it's definitely be interesting to see. Well, with that said, I really want to thank you for coming on, and I know you have a very bright future, and you're an important part of the ecosystem here in treating patients and treating in novel ways, which I'm excited about personally. And I think, for those of us who's following you guys closely, it's just great to see the whole story evolve and see that you can kind of start as a young entrepreneur and then, end up with where you're at. What would you tell, and I ask this of all my guests, what would you tell a young Jeff back in Hunneman,
Yeah.
studying and trying to hustle, or taking photos of the retina in the darkroom?
Yeah.
Knowing who you are now, what are some things you would tell that guy?
Yeah. So I think a couple of important pieces of information and advice would be, number one, I don't think that you can value forward momentum enough. And, look, you're going to run into road bumps along the way in your career.
Mm-hmm.
Your career is going to take a right or a left turn that you didn't expect it to.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with running a company. Forward momentum is a lot of what really has made us successful so far. At the end of the day, we're all going to look back at all the things that caused us stress during the development of our various products that we're trying to bring to market. But it's continuing through those adversities and making sure that you're problem solving and moving forward, and also understanding that you're gonna run into these things. And I sort of look at my career that way. At various stages along my career, did I think that I would be a CEO of a biopharmaceutical company? Probably not. But I really, I would say, relish all of the different experiences that I've had. People say, hey, you do a lot of speaking. I'm nervous. How do you do that on stage? Or how do you do that when you're standing in front of a group? And I say, look, I had to approach families about organ donation after they just lost a loved one. That's way more stressful than anything I'm going to do on stage. I worked in a lumber yard as a kid, talking to, grizzled contractors. That is not an easy thing to do either. So,
Right.
You take these experiences that you've had over your career, and at the time, they don't seem like they're going to make you a better person down the road. Yeah. At the end of the day, there's a lot of these things that I did along the way, I would say, make me the type of CEO that I am today.
Mm. So what type of CEO are you?
Well, I think if you were to ask my team, I think I lead by example. And I definitely get my sleeves rolled up and get involved. And, I'm definitely not the guy who sort of sits back and directs traffic. The part I love about being in biotech is I love the fact that you can be in the clinic, you could be at the benchtop, you can be in the business world, and every 4 or 5 years, it's sort of a different thing that we're focused and working on. It's never the same thing. Science is evolving, what we're working on is evolving, and so I love the fact that I can interface with all of those different aspects of the company, and I like to lead by doing. My team knows that there's really nothing that I'm going to ask them to do that I wouldn't roll up my sleeves and do just as well. There's a lot of days when I'm washing the dishes in the office, and a lot of days when I'm putting PowerPoint slides together. It's not getting a lot of people to direct to do those things.
Very good. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on, and we wish you best of luck.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. We hope you plan to join Jeff and other public company CEOs at the OIS Public Company Showcase on Thursday, July 16th. Podcast listeners can register for free at OIS.net. Stay tuned for next week's OIS Retina podcast with Dr. Firas Rehal and Paul Hallen, the global head of surgical retina at Alcon.